Hey, I'm Olajide Paris, and today we're going to be talking about headphones, specifically this Hifiman Arya Stealth Edition. Now, before we start, just a little disclaimer. Hifiman did send these headphones out for me to review and to keep. Thank you very much, but they are in no way influencing the content of this video at all. All thoughts and opinions are my own. With that being said, let's jump in. First, I just want to have a little chat about headphones in general. Headphones are a huge part of my workflow and have been for several years. I travel quite a lot, and therefore having high quality headphones is really important for me because I need to be able to mix or edit or compose wherever I am. The thing about headphones versus speakers is that they remove the element of the room completely. So anytime you put headphones on, you always have the same listening environment. It's not at all affected by the reflections in the room or the acoustics. The exception is, of course, with open backs, if there's any noise from air conditioning like I have now, which you won't hear in the video probably, or ambient noise, that those things can affect what you hear in headphones, but not the frequency response itself. And that's something that is really, really powerful because with studio monitors, for example, you have to spend thousands in room treatment and you have to design the room correctly first before you can get the most out of the speakers. So it's often the case that the room treatment and the design and the build itself is in fact more expensive than the studio monitors. Now, Hifiman is by no means a new brand, but you might not have heard of them. They're fairly well known in the world of hi-fi, as the name clearly suggests, but they haven't been adopted as much yet in the music production world. And the way that I found Hifiman was that they were suggested to me by a friend of mine whose ears I really trust. He's an engineer and he's a longtime friend and mentor. And he suggested to me the Hifiman Anandas, which I do own and I worked with for about a year. And I was super impressed with those, and I ended up with these, which were generously given to me by Hifiman. And the thing about Hifiman headphones is that they just punch well above their weight. And I just love gear that does that. Gear that feels and performs premium, but doesn't cost as much as the competitors. In this case, the Ananda was a substitute for the LCD-X by Odyssey, which is a more ubiquitous headphone that you'll find in studio environments. So the thing with Hifiman is that all of their designs feature a planar magnetic driver, which is a different technology to the drivers that you'll find in headphones by Sennheiser, Beyerdynamic, and Focal. You can look up what the differences are online, but the result is that a planar magnetic driver has much lower distortion. There's a lot more transient detail, better transient response, faster transients, which is great for anything that's percussive. And generally, they just have the result of sounding more detailed. They can just produce details that you can't get with other headphones. Now, Odyssey and some other companies also do make planar magnetic drivers as well. That technology is not exclusive to Hifiman. So what does this sound like compared to studio headphones that you might know? Well, if you're working with something like the lower end Beyerdynamics, like the 770s or the 880s, or you're working with a Sony 7506, something in that range, this is going to sound many orders of magnitude more detailed. And that's going to be the case until you get into more like the $500 or $600 range, where the differences are definitely there, but you need to listen for them more carefully to find them. That's to say that if you haven't treated yourself to the experience of a planar magnetic headphone or to a premium headphone in general, I'll get to pricing on this later on, this is going to open up a new world for you. Now, I'll talk about my experience working with this in different categories. First of all, with composing, this headphone is great because it helps a lot with the sound selection when I'm adding new instruments to a template or I'm choosing sound design elements or something like that. Having a headphone that is so resolving is really, really useful in being able to assess what sound is appropriate for the project that I'm working on. So that's how something like this works really well in a composing context. I've also put this headphone through its paces on mixing and mastering several tracks for clients, and the benefits are pretty clear there. There's a lot more detail. I've mentioned the transient response, which I found really useful when working with drum and percussion material. The sound stage is really good, and the imaging is really good, particularly when combined with the crossfeed function on my Grace Design M900, which I'll link to in the description below, and or gigahertz can opener, which I use in my mix, or not in the mix bus, but I route it into my DAW to basically feed a little bit of each ear to the other to simulate a little bit more accurately what it's like to mix with studio monitors. I found that while there is a little bit of a peak around 4K or so, I can take care of that with a little bit of EQ, using a little bit of linear phase EQ on the headphone itself, or if I'm using my Babyface, I can EQ that out in Total Mix Effects. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter because all it's doing is giving you a tiny bit more detail, and using your ears alongside with reference tracks, that all kind of takes care of itself. So I have absolutely no problems with it at all. Particularly as a composer and producer who works a lot with real instruments and orchestra specifically, this headphone, the Arya, and Hifiman headphones in general, are just really great at the imaging and staging and the sound presentation that is really needed to bring orchestral instruments to life. So this is a particularly good headphone for me because that's my world, orchestral instruments and world instruments and acoustic instruments. I've also used this on my usual workload of producing sample libraries, which in the time that I have had this headphone, I've probably produced 6 or 8 sample libraries, of which 3 or 4 are already released. And as a sample producer, having a tool like this is super valuable because you're able to really hear into the details of the sounds. You're able to hear the microphone self noise. You're able to hear the noise of the environment. You're able to hear the decay and the room information in detail that would be more difficult on more budget headphones. So yeah, if you're a sample producer or somebody who works a lot with editing sounds and you have to get into details, something like this could be very valuable to you. So I said I would talk about price and make a recommendation on whether or not you should get this. So this is not a cheap headphone. It's now going for, I think, $1,300, which is quite a bit more than, say, the HD600 or the DT770 or even Hifiman's own Ananda for around $700. Please do subscribe to my channel if you want to see the comparison of the Arya to the Ananda, which I will be releasing. But my conclusion is this: if you are somebody who is serious about audio, if you're a professional or aspiring professional, if you travel, if you don't already have a very high-end monitoring solution, this would be a really great investment for you because this is going to outperform a similarly priced studio monitor. If you were to spend $1,300 on a pair of studio monitors, they would not resolve as much as these would. Nor are you likely to get equal performance out of them from your room environment for reasons that I mentioned much earlier. One thing I've always found really interesting about producers and musicians is that we'll spend tens of thousands of dollars on things that make sounds for us, like our sample libraries, like our instruments, etc., plugins, but we cheap out on the monitoring end of things when it comes to high-end converters or studio monitors or headphones, and we're really kind of shortchanging ourselves because at the end of the day, we all need tools to be able to assess the material that we're working on, and we're not getting the full benefit of those other toys, which are a little bit cooler maybe, if we don't make this investment. So for me, I think it's worthwhile. If you got to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Again, please do subscribe for more content like this and grab my free Composer's Gear Guide in the link in the description below. See you next time.